Fame often brings wealth, power, and recognition, but it does not protect anyone from tragedy. For many celebrities, what seemed like an ordinary drive ended in disaster, leaving behind questions, shock, and grief. In this video, we will look at 6 real stories of the most horrifying car crashes ever recorded involving well-known figures. Events that changed lives in an instant and revealed how fragile life can be, no matter who you are. It was April 25th, 2002, in La Ceiba, Honduras. Lisa "Left Eye" Lopes, one-third of the world-famous R&B group TLC, was behind the wheel of a rented SUV. With her were family members, musicians, and a small film crew. She had come to Honduras for a spiritual retreat, documenting her journey on camera. She was looking for peace and healing. But that afternoon, everything changed. Lisa was driving a Mitsubishi Montero when an oncoming truck swerved into her lane. She pulled the wheel sharply, then tried to avoid another car. The SUV spun out of control, rolled several times, and slammed into 2 trees. Passengers were thrown from the vehicle. Lisa hit the ground, suffering a severe head injury. She died instantly. She was just 30 years old. Lisa was born on May 27th, 1971 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Her father, Ronald Lopes Sr., was a U.S. Army Staff Sergeant, and her mother, Wanda, worked as a seamstress. Lisa described her childhood home as strict, almost like boot camp, but her father was also a musician, and she picked up the piano at 5 years old. By 10, she was performing gospel songs with her siblings in a group called the Lopes Kids. At Philadelphia High School for Girls, Lisa was inspired by music that spoke to empowerment. In 1990, she joined a new Atlanta-based group called TLC, alongside Tian T-Boz Watkins and Rosanda Chili Thomas. The group dominated the charts through the 1990s, winning 4 Grammys with songs like No Scrubs, Creep, and Waterfalls. Lisa became known not only as a performer, but also as the creative force behind TLC, designing outfits, videos, and stage sets. She also worked on solo projects, recording tracks like Not Tonight, and collaborating with artists including Melanie C. of the Spice Girls. But her personal life drew headlines too. In the mid-1990s, she had a turbulent relationship with NFL player Andre Rison. After one argument, Lisa set fire to a pair of his sneakers, which spread and burned down his home. She received probation and court-ordered therapy. Behind the fame, Lisa battled emotional struggles and turned to spirituality for guidance. She believed energy never dies, only changes form. By 2002, she stepped back from the spotlight and traveled to Honduras with her brother, sister, assistant, and members of an up-and-coming R&B group called Egypt. She was also filming a documentary called The Last Days of Left Eye, recording personal video diaries about life, death, and transformation. Weeks before her own accident, she was involved in another tragedy. On April 6th, while riding in a van, a 10-year-old boy named Bayron Lopez was struck and fatally injured. Lisa helped carry him to the hospital and covered medical and funeral costs for his family. In her diary, she wondered if a spirit had mistaken the boy for her, noting how close their last names were, Lopes and Lopez. 19 days later, Lisa's own crash was caught on camera. She was one of 3 passengers thrown from the SUV. The official cause of death was a fractured skull. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Lisa's body was flown back to Atlanta, and her funeral took place on May 2nd, 2002. Thousands attended, and she was buried in Hillendale Memorial Gardens. Before her passing, she had been building educational centers in Honduras. Afterward, her family formed the Lisa Lopes Foundation, continuing her mission to help children. Its slogan came from her own words: "Energy never dies, it just transforms." Lisa's story was one of talent, struggle, and searching for peace. Even in her final days, she left behind a mystery that people still talk about today. It was the night of August 11th, 1956, in Springs, East Hampton, New York. Jackson Pollock, the famous abstract painter, known for his chaotic drip-style works, was behind the wheel of his Oldsmobile convertible. Beside him were his partner, Ruth Kligman, and her friend, Edith Metzger. They were less than a mile from Pollock's home when tragedy struck. Pollock had been drinking. As he drove into a curve at high speed, he lost control. The car flipped and slammed into a tree. Jackson Pollock and Edith Metzger were killed instantly. Ruth Kligman survived but suffered serious injuries. To the public, this was seen as the sad but predictable end of a troubled artist. But many historians point to something deeper, an influence in Pollock's final months that went far beyond alcohol. That influence was a radical therapy group in New York known as the Sullivan Institute. The institute was inspired by psychiatrist Harry Stack Sullivan, who believed loneliness harmed mental health and that adult relationships shaped emotional growth. But Sullivan himself never created the group. He had died in 1949. The true leader was Saul B. Newton, a man with no medical degree. He had worked as a clerk in a psychiatric facility linked to Sullivan's work. There, he learned Sullivan's ideas and twisted them into something extreme. With therapist Dr. Jane Pierce, Newton founded the Sullivan Institute. They claimed traditional families caused emotional damage. Patients were told to cut ties with parents, sometimes even give up their children to boarding schools or foster care. Inside the group, members lived communally. No one was allowed to be alone. Daily schedules controlled every interaction. The therapists promoted intimate encounters but banned long-term partners or attachments. Love and commitment were treated as harmful. Survivors later described coercion and psychological manipulation. By the mid-1950s, the Sullivan Institute had reached New York's artistic and intellectual elite. Clement Greenberg, a major art critic, was one of the first high-profile followers. He brought friends into the group, including Jackson Pollock. Pollock had struggled since childhood. He grew up in an unstable home with a violent father, turned to heavy drinking as a teenager, and carried deep anger and anxiety into adulthood. His wife, fellow painter Lee Krasner, often sacrificed her career to manage his behavior. In the early 1950s, Pollock stayed sober for a short period, but by 1955, he was drinking heavily again, and his marriage was strained. That's when Greenberg introduced him and Krasner to Dr. Jane Pierce. Krasner dismissed the methods. Pollock did not. The therapy encouraged his addictions rather than treating them. Alcohol was described as a tool for creativity. His marriage was framed as an obstacle. He was told monogamy held him back, and that freedom, socially and sexually, would help him grow. Pollock embraced this. He distanced himself from Krasner, began a relationship with Ruth Kligman, and lost interest in painting. By 1956, he had stopped producing major works. He spent most of his time drinking and spiraling further out of control. That August night, his downward path ended in the fatal crash. But the story didn't stop there. After Pollock's death, Clement Greenberg remained loyal to the Sullivan Institute, helping bring more members in. For decades, families were torn apart under its control. Only after Saul Newton's death in 1991 did hundreds of former members come forward, sharing stories of forced separations, abuse, and lives dismantled in the name of therapy. Jackson Pollock's death was tragic, but it wasn't just alcohol that pushed him toward it. The Sullivan Institute had removed the last restraints holding him together. Once those were gone, his end became inevitable. It was March 1st, 2025, just before sunrise in Montgomery, Alabama. Angie Stone, a 63-year-old Grammy-nominated R&B and soul singer, was returning to Atlanta after performing at a Mardi Gras event in Mobile. She was in a 2021 Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van with 8 others. The group was traveling through the night toward Baltimore, Maryland, where Angie was scheduled to perform at the halftime show of the CIAA Men's Championship basketball game later that day. But she never arrived. At 4:25 a.m., the van overturned on Interstate 65, about 5 miles south of Montgomery. Seconds later, it was hit by a commercial 18-wheeler, a 2021 Freightliner Cascadia, driven by a 33-year-old man from Texas. Out of the 9 people inside, Angie was the only one who lost her life. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Her passing shocked the music world. Angie wasn't just a singer, she was a pioneer who shaped music and culture. News first broke through her longtime manager, Walter Millsap III, who heard from Angie's daughter, Diamond, and Blondie, one of her oldest friends from the sequence. Diamond confirmed the loss in a painful post, writing, "My mommy is gone." Hours earlier, she had asked fans for prayers. Later, she and her brother Michael Archer released a statement asking for privacy while they processed their grief. Angie was born in Columbia, South Carolina. Her parents had a major influence on her life. Her mother sang at home, while her father performed gospel and blues in local clubs. That upbringing shaped a career that lasted more than 4 decades. At just 16 years old, she co-founded The Sequence, one of the first female rap groups signed to Sugar Hill Records. Their 1979 single Funk You Up became a hit and was later sampled by artists like Dr. Dre and Bruno Mars. When the group split in the mid-1980s, Angie joined projects like Vertical Hold and Devox. She also worked closely with neo-soul artist D'Angelo, contributing vocals and songwriting to his first 2 albums and touring with him as a backup singer. Her solo career began in 1999 with Black Diamond. Its single, No More Rain, In This Cloud, stayed at number 1 on Billboard's adult R&B chart for 10 weeks. Her second album, Mahogany Soul in 2001, featured Wish I Didn't Miss You, her biggest international success. She later released Stone Love, The Art of Love and War, and most recently, Love Language in 2023. Angie also acted in films like The Hot Chick, The Fighting Temptations, and Ride Along, and performed on Broadway in Chicago. On television, she appeared in Celebrity Fit Club and R&B Divas, Atlanta. Though she earned 3 Grammy nominations, Angie often admitted she felt overlooked. Songwriting kept her career steady. She wrote for Raphael Saadiq, Erykah Badu, and others. Her children described her as a trailblazer and a symbol of strength, pointing to her anthem, Brotha, as proof of her impact. After her death, tributes came from Jamie Foxx, Patrice Lovely, Tyler Perry, and Reverend Bernice King. At the CIAA game where she was set to perform, a moment of silence honored her. In later years, Angie mentored young artists and ran her foundation, Angel Stripes. She also managed serious health issues, including congestive heart failure, but turned her life around through diet changes. In 2023, she told the Associated Press, "I feel complete. I have a new love, a new album, a new outlook, and a newfound joy." On March 1st, 2025, Angie Stone became more than a name in music history. She was the only one who lost her life in that crash, but her voice and influence will continue to live on. It was July 3rd, 2025, at around 12:40 a.m., when tragedy struck on the A52 highway near Zamora, a remote area in northwestern Spain. Diogo Jota, a 28-year-old star for Liverpool and Portugal, had just experienced one of the happiest moments of his life. Only 11 days earlier, he had married his longtime partner, Ruth Cardoso. Together, they had 3 young children. Hours before, Jota had posted a video of their wedding on Instagram with the caption, "A day we will never forget." He wasn't traveling alone. With him was his younger brother, Andre Silva, a 25-year-old professional footballer for Penafiel in Portugal's 2nd Division. The two were driving a bright green Lamborghini Huracan towards Santander, planning to catch a ferry back to England. Because of a lung procedure earlier that year, Jota had been advised not to fly. But they never made it to Santander. According to Spain's Civil Guard, after overtaking another car, the Lamborghini's front tire suddenly burst. The vehicle veered off the road, crashed, and caught fire. The impact was so severe that neither Jota nor Andre had a chance to survive. When emergency responders arrived, the car was fully engulfed in flames. Firefighters had to put out both the vehicle and nearby dry vegetation. Police stated that Jota appeared to be driving, and tire marks suggested the car may have been moving at high speed. However, 2 Portuguese truck drivers who witnessed the incident disagreed. Jose Alexo Duarte, who said the Lamborghini passed him minutes earlier, insisted it was moving carefully. Another driver, Jose Azevedo, stopped and attempted to fight the fire with an extinguisher, but could not control it. He later said, "They weren't speeding. They were completely relaxed." The highway stretch was isolated, poorly lit, and known to locals as dangerous. Authorities continued investigating, focusing on the tire marks and whether the road's condition played a role. The final report would later be sent to a court in Puebla de Sanabria. Back in Portugal, the news shocked the football world. Just weeks earlier, Jota had lifted the UEFA Nations League trophy. In his career, he scored 65 goals in 182 matches for Liverpool and 14 goals in 49 appearances for Portugal. Friends and teammates described him as humble, hardworking, and kind. Cristiano Ronaldo wrote on Instagram, "Just now we were together in the national team. Just now you were married. To your family, I send my condolences and strength. We will all miss you." Liverpool FC confirmed the loss in a statement, lowered flags at Anfield, and closed its stores and tours. A book of condolences was opened for fans. Former Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp said he was heartbroken. Current coach Arne Slot called Jota the essence of a Liverpool player. Tributes came from UEFA President Alexander Ceferin, Portuguese Federation President Pedro Proença, teammates like Darwin Núñez and Harvey Elliott, and even political leaders from both Portugal and the UK. On Saturday, the brothers were laid to rest in Gondomar, near Porto, as thousands mourned. The investigation into the crash remains ongoing, with questions over whether speed, road conditions, or both played a role. Jota's last post remains online, a video from his wedding captioned, "A day we will never forget." And for the football world, his loss is one they will never forget either. It was April 10th, 1992, outside Needles, California. Sam Kinison, the 38-year-old comedian famous for his loud rants and shocking routines, was driving his black Pontiac Trans Am. Beside him was his new wife, Malaka Sawiri. Just 6 days earlier, they had married in Las Vegas and returned from their honeymoon in Hawaii. They were now headed to Laughlin, Nevada, where Sam had a sold-out show at the Riverside Resort Hotel and Casino. For Sam, this wasn't just another performance. After years of struggles, substance use, personal problems, and public controversies, his life seemed to be stabilizing. His career was strong, he had just married, and he had committed to living clean. For once, things looked steady. But while driving along US Highway 95, everything changed. Coming from the opposite direction was a Chevrolet pickup driven by a 17-year-old boy from Las Vegas. The truck had beer cans inside, and witnesses said it had been swerving dangerously. At about 7:30 p.m., the driver tried to pass another car but crossed into Sam's lane. The truck was going too fast to correct. The collision was head-on. Sam's friends, including comedian Carl Lopes, were driving behind and saw the crash happen. They rushed to help. At first, Sam appeared fine. He walked out of the car on his own, with cuts on his face and bleeding lips, but nothing that looked severe. His brother Bill and Carl told him to lie down while waiting for paramedics. Then, something unusual happened. Sam began speaking. Not to those around him, but as if to someone unseen. "I don't want to die. I don't want to die," he said. His tone was calm, almost like a conversation. Carl, holding his head, later said it seemed like Sam was listening to a voice only he could hear. Then Sam paused, looked into the distance, and said, "But why?" After a silence, his voice softened. "Okay, okay, okay." Carl recalled that his final words sounded peaceful, as if he had accepted an answer from someone he loved. Moments later, Sam stopped breathing. Paramedics arrived but could not revive him. An autopsy revealed severe internal injuries, a dislocated neck, a torn aorta, and ruptured blood vessels in his abdomen. He had not been wearing a seatbelt, and the crash impact threw his head into the windshield. Malaka was seriously injured, but survived. the teenage driver was charged with vehicular manslaughter, pleaded guilty, and was sentenced to 1 year of probation, 300 hours of community service, and a 2-year license suspension. His name was not released because of his age. For friends, the loss was painful. Sam had not been reckless that night. He was sober, newly married, and simply driving to work. Comedian Richard Belzer said, "I can't accept it. He wasn't doing anything wrong. Sam was buried in Tulsa, Oklahoma. His gravestone reads, 'In another time and place, he would have been called a prophet.'" Before comedy, Sam had been a preacher, like his father. His shouting style on stage came from the pulpit, and though many called his routines offensive, those close to him described him as kind and generous. In recent years, he had joined Alcoholics Anonymous, was settling lawsuits, and was trying to move on from his past. In 1988, his youngest brother Kevin had taken his own life, but Sam pressed forward with his career. By 1991, he was still battling his temper, once fighting with Guns N' Roses guitarist Slash, but with Malika and his commitment to sobriety, he was making changes. After his death, tributes poured in. George Carlin dedicated his HBO special to him, and in 1993, a Fox tribute featured Robin Williams, Jim Carrey, and others. A film about his life, based on his brother's memoir, was also planned. Sam Kinison left a strong mark on comedy, but it was his final moments that many remembered. Quiet, calm, and almost like a conversation with someone unseen. On that desert highway, his last words were simple, "Okay," and then he was gone. It was the early hours of September 16th, 1977, in southwest London. Marc Bolan, the 29-year-old frontman of the glam rock band T-Rex, sat in the passenger seat of a purple Mini 1275 GT. His girlfriend, singer Gloria Jones, was driving. They had just left a dinner celebration and were only about a mile from home when the car swerved off the road and crashed. Marc was killed instantly. Gloria survived, but with serious injuries. Marc had never learned to drive. For years, he spoke about a fear of dying young, and often said he believed it would happen in a car crash. He predicted his death multiple times, sometimes with chilling accuracy. Marc was born Mark Feld in East London. In the 1960s, he joined a short-lived band called John's Children before forming Tyrannosaurus Rex in 1967. This was an acoustic group, but around that time, Marc once told his manager, Simon Napier Bell, "I'd be more successful if I died young, like James Dean or Eddie Cochran. Then my records would sell much more." When Napier Bell joked, "In a Rolls Royce?" Marc replied, "No, in a Mini." 10 years later, that prediction came true. He often spoke about not living long. His biographer Paul Rowland noted that when Marc lived with his wife Junechild, he'd sometimes ask her to wake him every hour to make sure he was still alive. By 1970, Marc shortened the band's name to T-Rex and embraced glam rock. The group exploded in fame with Ride a White Swan, Get It On, 20th Century Boy, and Children of the Revolution. By 1972, they outsold The Who, Hendrix, and even the Beatles in singles. But despite the success, Marc always carried his fear of an early death. In one TV interview, when asked what life might look like at 50 or 60, Marc simply said, "I don't think I'll live that long." He never drove his cars and refused to get a license. His lyrics sometimes seemed prophetic. In his 1972 single Solid Gold Easy Action, one line mentioned picking foxes from a tree. The Mini he died in carried the license plate FOX661L. By 1973, Marc's fame declined. He split from June, began a relationship with Gloria, and struggled with heavy drinking. David Bowie moved on from glam rock, but Marc stayed with it. His producer, Tony Visconti, said Marc was afraid to let go of the T-Rex craze. Things shifted in 1975 when Marc and Gloria had a son, Roland. He tried to get healthier, and in 1976, his single, I Love to Boogie, reached number 13 in the UK charts. He even got his own TV show, fueling hopes of a comeback. In February 1977, while in Paris, Marc reportedly stared for hours at a painting titled 16th of September, the exact date he would die later that year. On September 15th, Marc and Gloria went out celebrating. Around 5 a.m., their Mini left the road, hit a steel fence post, and then a tree. Marc died instantly. Gloria survived with a broken jaw and other injuries. For decades, fans believed the sycamore tree was the cause, but witnesses and later research revealed the steel post caused Marc's fatal injury. Ironically, the tree likely stopped the car from sliding down a slope, saving Gloria. The Mini also had mechanical issues, low tire pressure, and loose wheel nuts. Marc's son later said, if he had been in his Rolls-Royce, he would have lived, but he lent that car to a friend, and his driver had the night off. Marc died the same day as opera singer Maria Callas. Today, fans still gather at the crash site, where a shrine and plaque stand by the sycamore tree. Marc Bolan was 29 years old. He died exactly the way he had always feared, a passenger in a Mini, in a crash he seemed to predict years before it happened.